In a world full of darkness, it's time to let the light shine bright. This is Strength to Overcome, where faith and action help us grow through adversity. G'day everyone, welcome back to the Strength to Overcome podcast. I am Matt Morton, your host, and I am very excited to be back with you again today. I wanted to share with you how important this series has become because a couple of weeks ago, I decided to shift the direction of this podcast, believing that truth will help set people free. And for many of you that have caught that episode, I did it on the flat earth, which for me took a lot of courage. Now, the day after I released that episode, I showed up to work and there was a young man getting something out of the back of his car right where I pulled in. The back of his shirt had Joshua chapter 1 on it, which I'll get into shortly. But I went up to the young man and I thanked him for wearing that shirt today as a reminder from the Almighty to step out with courage. I also had a friend of mine produce a website with t-shirts on it at genesis127gear.com and immediately gravitated towards a particular shirt, which I will show up for those that are watching, that says, "Train to take down giants," which is found in 1 Samuel 1:17, which is a significant number for me. So here's the shirt for those that are watching. Pretty cool. So I had these reminders put in front of me, and then this morning at the gym, I saw the same young man again who had worn the Joshua shirt several weeks ago. And this just made me grin because I knew that I would be recording this episode later today. And to me, it's a healthy reminder from the Almighty to press on and be courageous. So let's get into today's topic. It's a good one. Let me ask you something straight off the bat. What if the biggest thing holding you back right now is actually not the size of the problem in front of you, but the way you see yourself in comparison to it? Because there's a moment through Scripture where an entire nation stood at the edge of their promise. They looked at what was in front of them and they said, "We are like grasshoppers." So today we're going to dive in a little bit deeper, not just into fear, not just into the courage, but into the origin of the giants themselves and why it matters more than most people realize. Because this isn't just history. This is a pattern throughout Scripture, and if you can understand it, you'll also understand how to overcome. So let's go back. Let's go way back, all the way before the flood, before the wilderness, before David ever faced Goliath, the story we've all heard of before. So let's go back to Genesis chapter 6. We get one of the most mysterious chapters in Scripture found anywhere. It says, when mankind began to multiply on the earth and daughters were born to them, that the sons of God saw the daughters of men were beautiful, and they took wives for themselves of all whom they chose. Now that phrase, sons of God, has been heavily debated for generations. Some believe it refers to human rulers or the line of Seth. But let's read on. The Nephilim were on the earth in those days and also afterward. Mighty men of old, men of renown. These are not ordinary people. They are something different, specifically something powerful, something outside of what was originally created. And that's where ancient writings like Enoch expand on the picture. I'm holding it up for those that are listening. And it's important to understand this because the Book of Enoch isn't just some random text. It's actually still preserved and read today in the Ethiopian Orthodox Church and many others, and considered Scripture because it's part of their Bible. So when we talk about Enoch, we're actually talking about a very ancient tradition that many people throughout history have taken very seriously and still to this day do. So according to Enoch, in chapter 6, there were these beings called watchers. And these angelic beings were referred to as the sons of God, very similar to Genesis account. And these watchers left their proper place. They came down to earth and they took women and produced offspring. Not normal humans, not ordinary people, but something different, something stronger, bigger, more powerful. Kind of a superhuman race. And you wonder where Hollywood gets this stuff, right? It's all in scripture, it's all in Enoch, it's all in other ancient texts. The Nephilim and the giants. According to those traditions, in Enoch, they also brought knowledge, not just huge in size, but of weapons, enchantments, metallurgy, many hidden things that led them into fornication and corruption, stuff they were never meant to know. Now, some traditions even suggest that this early knowledge is what helped humanity build things that still raise questions today. So when you start looking at things around the world, you begin to notice a pattern. These are massive structures, ancient cities, stonework, engineering, things that still stand today. I've got a pothole at work a foot deep that they can't seem to get right. So when we look at the pyramids, for example, where I have been and actually climbed, these things are in perfect alignment. They are massive stones weighing hundreds of tons. Thousands of years ago, these things were put into place, and they are still standing. I remember going deep underground and seeing coffins that are absolutely massive, completely unfathomable who they were for and how they got them down there. It's unbelievable to see these things in person. Then you look at places like Baalbek. We have stones, again, weighing hundreds of tons that have been completely carved and moved and set into place to perfection. Ridiculous how these things were cut and relocated. We have Machu Picchu. A lot of people have been there, where stones are cut so precisely you can't even slide a piece of paper between them. We have giant doors in ancient structures all around the world that they have now cut smaller doors into them so that you can go in and out through them. So who are the larger doors for? We have ancient cities that have been completely carved out of mountains to absolute precision and perfection. India, China, Turkey, all over the world. These structures that make people stop and ask questions. It's probably why you're here. So how was this done? Who had the knowledge to build these things? What kind of understanding did they have at that time that we no longer have? Now, I do want to be clear, the Bible is not specifically saying these were built by giants, and we don't want to read into it. But what we can definitely say is this. Throughout history, as we've been told, there is this evidence of human capability that feels way bigger than expected. Whether someone connects that to ancient knowledge of the giants, Nephilim, or simply to skilled civilizations, the effect is the same for what we're talking about. It reminds us that people have been here doing things that now to us, when we stand in these presence, they feel overwhelming. And so it brings us all the way back to the real question today is, what do you believe when you're standing in front of something that feels absolutely impossible? So let's go back now to the story from Genesis, and the broader tradition highlights a pattern. We have corrupted knowledge. We've got corrupted power. And so now we have a corrupted world. And these giants didn't just exist. They dominated. They corrupted, they consumed. It talks about in the Book of Enoch that they sinned against man beast, animals, fish in the sea. So we wonder where some of these things come from in Hollywood. And we speculate, but Book of Enoch talks about it. Violence is filling the earth. We've got chaos absolutely everywhere. And humanity has completely lost its direction. And this is where the judgment comes in, right? Yahweh looks at the earth, sees the corruption, and he makes a judgment call. He makes a decision. The flood. So in Genesis 6 through 9, Yahweh is actually resetting the world, which a lot of people will talk about. Everything outside the ark is completely wiped out. He preserves his genetic line. Everything's gone, including the giants of that time. Because what's happening now when we look at it is that this isn't the original creation that Yahweh had intended. So he puts Noah and his family on the ark to preserve them and his creation, right? They were found righteous. They were found holy. That helps us understand why that might be the case. So here's the question that starts to connect something on a deeper level. When people read the Old Testament, they say, man, why would Yahweh command that entire nations be slaughtered, destroyed? We've got men, women, children, animals. He's like, go in, wipe them out. It feels harsh. The Bible doesn't specifically explain this in terms of modern DNA language or understanding, but some might look at it like this. If there is a deep corruption of his original humanity and those corrupted lines are going to continue, then Yahweh's actions of destroying these races are not random violence, it's actually protection. He's preserving his creation. Otherwise, it's completely overtaken by something that was never meant to exist. So let's fast forward hundreds of years. It's actually thousands of years after, not thousands, but 1,000 give or take after the flood. And what do we see? Numbers 13. I'm holding up the scriptures again. The spies go into the land. They come back and they're saying, we saw the giants. Okay, so wait a second. We've got the flood wipes everything out. So how do we still have giants, right? And this is where interpretation comes in. Some believe these are the descendants of earlier giant lines. Some believe it's the reemergence of the same kind of corruption. Others believe that there's simply huge people, large groups of humans. But for today's topic, here's what matters for the conversation that we're diving in on today. The problem in this story doesn't disappear. The challenge remained. And the people still felt really small. So let's simplify this and wrap it all up before we move on, because the Bible uses different names and it can feel confusing. So here's the simple breakdown. We've got the Nephilim. They show up back in Genesis chapter 6. They're the earliest mention connected to that time before the flood. Then later on, you hear about the Anakim. These are the people that spies saw in Numbers 13. These are the ones they said, we felt like grasshoppers next to them. So these things were enormous. It's not a joke. And then you have the Rephaim, mentioned throughout Deuteronomy, Joshua. So a broader term used for giant people in the land can be used in different translations differently, right? We've also got the kings like Og of Bashan. These are listed as giants in scripture, different names, different moments in history, but it's the same pattern. Okay, so something is bigger than you and it's standing in front of you. And the question is never only, well, what is it? But what do you believe when you're standing in front of that giant? Okay, so this is exactly what Joshua and Caleb understood in that account of Numbers 13. We've got 12 spies going into the land to explore it and do recon. 10 of those 12 spies come back absolutely terrified. 2, Joshua and Caleb, they see it differently. They say, we're able to overcome it. So just pause there again. I'm going to say that again. Those 2 come back and say, we are well able to overcome it. They saw the same giants, but they didn't see themselves as grasshoppers. The others said we were like grasshoppers in their sight, And that's where they lost. Not in battle, but in their identity. So let me pause here. This is where, to me, it gets a little more personal, because the giants weren't the real problem. The agreement was what they believed about themselves is the issue in the presence of something bigger than them. So now catch this. We've got the 12 spies go into the land, and they were right on the cusp. The promise wasn't far away. They were already at the edge of the land, about to take over it. Joshua, Caleb saw the giants, said, we can overcome it. The others said, we were like grasshoppers. And so because of that moment of fear, that word fear, everything changed. Numbers 14, Yahweh declares, I'll read it, for 40 years, paraphrasing here, but 1 year for each day, you will wander in the wilderness. So the promise didn't change, but the timeline did. They were punished. So what could have happened instantly was delayed by 40 years because of their fear, their lack of faith. Not because of the giants, but because of their unbelief. And only 2 men out of those 12, Joshua and Caleb, actually lived to step into that promised land. Everyone else, they missed it. They didn't get to go in. They died in the wilderness. So now fast forward 40 years later, in Joshua 1, the shirt of this young chap I saw at the gym, Yahweh doesn't actually remove the giants, but he addresses the mindset. And he says something that is repeated 3 times. Be strong and courageous. Not once, not twice, 3 times. Joshua chapter 1. Why? Because Joshua is about to face the same land from 40 years earlier, the same enemies, the same giants that stopped the last generation. But this time, the response has to change, okay? Yahweh gives him 3 anchors. He gives him the promise, I will give you this land. The presence, I will be with you wherever you go. And the practice, meditate on this word day and night. So in other words, don't focus on the giants. Focus on what I've said. Don't focus on your size. Focus on my presence. Don't focus on the fear. Focus on the truth, which is what I'm trying to do in this series. So let's move forward again. We've got hundreds of years after Joshua and Caleb took the land. Giants are still showing up, right? All through scripture. Anyone that says giants didn't exist doesn't make a lot of sense, because it's all through the scripture and we've got evidence around the world. But the question is not, why are they still there? The question for today's purpose is, how are they going to respond when they are? 1 Samuel 17, we meet Goliath. Now, he's a giant. He's from Gath, right? We've got these details. And he's not just any giant. He's a part of a family of giants. And then later on through scripture, it tells us he likely had 4 brothers. So this wasn't just one problem. It's a system. It's a pattern. And what do we see? Goliath didn't just show up once. He came out day after day, morning and evening for 40 days, taunting, mocking, challenging these people, and not one single man stepped forward. Not one. And I'm sure there were some warriors in this army, but they were all paralyzed by fear. So this thing was huge. They've got this grasshopper mindset all over again. Now, David shows up. And here's the part that's interesting, at least to me, and it changes everything. David wasn't even supposed to be there, or was he? He wasn't enlisted. He wasn't part of the army. He was sent by his father just to bring food. He was running an errand. And yet he's the only one who sees the situation totally differently. David's not a warrior. He's a shepherd. He's not trained for battle, but he does have experience. because he says, I fought a lion, I fought a bear with my bare hands, I rescued a lamb from these wild beasts that you wouldn't go anywhere near, and saved them. And what's powerful is this, he sees that as moments of preparation. He saw them as training, proof that Yahweh was with David. So here's something cool. The story goes on, and David picks up 5 stones. Now, there's a debate about why. One thought is simple. He wanted some backup in case he missed. But another thought is, and to me it's a powerful one, is that he knew Goliath had brothers. So David's not just about taking down one giant. He's ready to take them all on. And to me, that's the different mindset that I'm trying to highlight with today's episode. It's not a survival mode. It's domination mode. And David goes out. He slays the giant with 1 stone in this sling, and then he cuts off his head. So it's an astonishing victory that nobody else could do it but this shepherd. And later on, David becomes the king of Israel. So in this case, the army saw the giant and froze. David saw a giant and he ran forward. Now, what's the difference? He didn't measure the giant against himself. He measured that giant against Yahweh. Now, this brings it into your life. Your giants might not be 10, 20, 50, or 100 feet tall, but they are real. They are fear, anxiety, pressure, depression, loneliness, heartache, loss, doubt, responsibility, addictions. That's huge. And just like Israel, you have a choice. Grasshopper identity or Yahweh-aligned identity. Now, this isn't pretending about the problem isn't huge. It's not big. It's not giant. It's about refusing to let it define you. So here's the question. Where have you been seeing yourself as small, a grasshopper? Where have you agreed with fear instead of truth? Because the giants didn't stop Israel. Fear did. And fear only wins if you agree with it. So today, my challenge to you is to be strong. According to Joshua, be courageous. Not because you feel ready, but because Yahweh is with you. Have I not commanded you, be strong and courageous? Do not be afraid. For Yahweh your Elohim is with you wherever you go. This is strength to overcome, where you were made for more than fear. You were made to overcome. So this week, I hope that this message reaches you and takes you through into the land, into the promise that Yahweh has given to you, and that you can stay strong and courageous. I'll catch you everyone next week. Cheers.